So good afternoon to all. It is indeed honor and privilege to welcome all of you to this session on urban mobility. I welcome all our distinguished speakers of the session who are here with us today. Some of our speakers are also joining virtually. I request our moderator, Mr. Vipin Sondhi, Chairman CII National Committee on Future Mobility and Battery Storage, to please initiate this session. I request all our speakers to please come up on the stage. Thank you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us on this session on urban mobility. Should be very, very interesting. It's a very topical subject. It's a subject that in many ways all of you are involved because it's the wider arm of, let's say, sustainability that comes in, something that we are living through. We have about an hour and we hope to make the best use of it. We've got one of our colleagues, Mr. O.P. Agarwal, online, as you can see him. I will set the context and then we'll get each one of our speakers to speak for about 5 minutes and then we'll have a Q&A. We'd love to have questions from the audience over here. Mobility is a paradigm. We know it's fast evolving in our country, around the world, with the recognition of transport as a service to move people and goods, whether it's transport as a service, it's battery as a service, it is a lot of it is now going to be co-owned or not owned at all. Climate change policies, and this year we've seen it around the world and in India really make an impact that has woken us up, is disrupting the industry globally, but also paving the way for sustainable mobility. Clean, low carbon, interconnected, integrated, to deliver mobility services efficiently to all of us. Mobility solutions, therefore, need to focus on accessibility, reliability, of course, the quality of the service to improve business cases and ensure sustainability of efforts. Now, many countries, along with India, are taking leadership in adopting alternative fuel technologies. A lot of technology development is yet to happen globally, locally. We are seeing that there is a focus on flex fuel vehicles, on battery chemistries, on, well, electric vehicles, but we mustn't forget there are others like hydrogen and fuel cell technologies. The new paradigm of sustainable mobility also pushes us to think beyond technology and make sure that mobility networks and infrastructure is inclusive and resilient to the impact of climate change. And last but not the least, we'd like to harness digital technologies and existing skill sets in India to enable seamless integration between multimodal transport systems so that we have intelligent mobility, which is safe, reliable, efficient. All new developments in the mobility sector are also closely linked to the energy sector. And if planned well, clean energy and clean mobility transitions can greatly complement one another, reducing what is the target for our country, reducing the import bills of fuels and supporting large-scale deployment of renewables. Now, this situation presents immense opportunities for different stakeholders to come together and build clean mobility solutions for the future. So let's begin with the first speaker. We've got Mr. O.P. Agarwal joining us online. He is the CEO of WRI India and a tremendous amount of experience in public policy issues related to urban development, poverty alleviation, capacity building, governance. He is from the IAS, during which he held several positions
with the national government and the state government of Assam. Mr. Agarwal, 5 minutes, please.
Thanks very much, Mr. Sondhi, and thanks to CII for inviting me for this 17th Sustainability Summit. I'm privileged. A topic that I'm very passionate about. And what I thought is I'll use these 5 minutes to talk about what I see as the big changes that are taking place in the urban mobility space. You've laid it out very well. It's a sector that is undergoing massive disruptions, and digital technologies have really enabled that to happen. So we are no longer in a situation where most people want to travel in their personal motor vehicles, and only those who can't afford a personal motor vehicle are taking some kind of public transport. Today, you have so many more options of shared mobility that people are beginning to adopt or take those shared mobility options a lot more seriously. So when I talk about the big changes, I think one, of course, is very obvious to everyone, is the shift from the IC engine to the electric vehicle. That itself has its multiple dimensions of getting a new technology in on a very big way. But what I would like to spend some more time on is really a paradigm where we are moving from owning a vehicle to owning a ride. All we need is, when we need to travel, we need to own a seat on some kind of a ride. And those ride options are really proliferating in such a big way that there are many more options available to us than the normal bus that we have seen. I think this is a very good thing in many ways. One, it allows shared mobility, which means it helps reduce congestion. It helps reduce the space required for parking. It helps people in not having to drive through congestion. Many benefits that this has got. So I would say this is a very good development. The other major development that I see is the growth of micro mobility. Particularly when I go to New York, each time I have gone there, what has amazed me is the pace at which micro-mobility is growing. Small electric scooters, these are coming up in a very big way. They've yet to hit India in such a big way, but I think that is something that we will be looking for in India as well in the years ahead. Coming to shared mobility options, all of us are familiar with the Uber and the Ola. Now you have Blue Smart. We have one of the panelists from there. I think these are really exciting developments that are taking place. The US also has the concept of a zip car. I lived there for 5 years. I never owned a car. I use the zip car all the time. That again is something that has come into India in the form of a Zoom car, but it hasn't really exploded the way it did in the US. I don't know what the reason for that is. You are seeing smaller buses. The buses need not be the same 12-meter bus carrying 30 or 40 people, but innovations in making bus services a lot better in terms of quality. Maybe at a higher price, but much better in terms of quality. Uber has come up with an Uber bus. A company called Shuttle was operating app-based services in the Delhi-Gurgaon area. There are many other such innovations that are coming in. So I think this is where urban mobility is going as we move ahead. Not so much focused on people owning a vehicle, but people finding some way of traveling with multiple options being available rather than having to own a vehicle to get a service. This is what is coming up as, mobility as a service. And you could just on an app pick up some kind of a mobility option based on how much time you have and how much you can afford to pay. Multiple options available. So let me stop with that. I think this is where mobility is headed in the years ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Agarwal. And, owning a vehicle to sharing a ride, we're getting familiar with that. But I think the point of the growth of micro mobility, which is small electric scooters or even bicycles, which could be a great healthy option if we were to design our urban systems around pedestrian, around women, around children, and ensure that we use more and more of micro mobility. Our next speaker is Wiebren van der Waart. Very interesting to have a Dutch gentleman here stationed out of Bombay and Delhi now. He's the co-founder of and the CEO of Bright Blue, driven and passionate about electric mobility and the transition to renewable energy. why Vibran has chosen to focus its efforts on the transition to electric mobility and renewable energy in Asian cities, as there is a huge opportunity for growth in Asia with a strong economic outlook and high degree of urbanization and a strong projected demand for mobility. Vibran, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Sondi. And first of all, I would like to thank the CII for being here and for inviting me. It's a real honor and pleasure to be here today. And I'd like to thank Mr. Vipin Sondi for this nice introduction, which kind of really summarizes the why and what I do and why I'm here. So I'll expound on that a little bit, telling you why I'm building Bright Blue, what we're doing. And what I would also like to do, I hate to hear myself talk all the time, so I would like to open the floor also for questions to come in while I'm talking. I'd like to make this interactive. If you have any questions, please feel free to interrupt me, because I hate hearing myself talk 5 minutes straight or 10 minutes straight. And then you'll be falling asleep as well. So please feel free to ask me your questions and to interrupt me. Don't feel shy. Without further ado, so quick introduction. My name is Vibran van der Vaart. I'm originally from the Netherlands, from Amsterdam, but I've been in India for the last 8 years. Now, how did I get here, and what am I actually doing? I've been working in the field of electric mobility for the last 11 years, started out in Amsterdam. That's really sort of a very interesting sort of example as well, and how mobility and what the private sector is doing and startups like ours are doing, and how it intersects with policy. Because one of the, I think, the prime reasons why I, as a Dutchman, can do this work here in India is for the very fact that the Dutch government, as early as 2007, 2008, really chose to make very progressive policy in the field of electric mobility. The Netherlands is a very small country, as you may know. It consists of just under 20 million people. So all in all, smaller than the city of Delhi in terms of inhabitants. But it's a very progressive country. We do not have an established OEM industry, so that was not keeping us back in terms of adoption and policy for electric vehicles, which you see in some countries that have strong native OEM industries. You see that the adoption, the sort of the progressive way forward, is a little slower. But so the Netherlands made a framework, opened up the markets for foreign OEMs to come and test their electric vehicles there. That's how it started. That's where industry started working together with government, with startups, with academia as well, in sort of a quadrant and very close cooperation. And that saw the industry pick up fairly quickly. First charging infrastructure was set up, and that's how I made my first strides in the world of electric mobility. A very small anecdote on the side. I was really sort of, things changed for me when I got into the industry, but when I really started driving a Nissan Leaf and then a Tesla Model S, I couldn't stop talking about it for 3 months straight. All my friends, my parents, my family, they went crazy because I couldn't stop talking about it. So it's really, I think it's very deeply ingrained in me. At the same time, I had a background in India. During my studies at the University of Amsterdam, I did a fair amount of traveling in India. I did a gap year in Sri Lanka, which was between my university, or sort of between my high school and university. So I knew India a little bit. I knew Asia a little bit. I've seen Indian cities before, and Indian cities still today. We're in one of the most polluted cities in the world. So I think the need for clean mobility, in the broader sense of the word, and electric mobility very specifically, is very large here. So with that background, I actually got a job at the Netherlands Consulate General back in 2014 in Bombay or Mumbai. And that's where I started my journey. I first started looking at helping Dutch companies, clean tech companies in the solar space, in the electric mobility space, entering the Dutch market. That lasted for about a year, and thereafter I was able to set up a public-private partnership with the Dutch government and a number of Dutch charging solutions players that saw us entering the Indian market. It was a 3-year program, and that ran from 2014 till 2018. And we took a lot of learnings from that. And I think one of the main things that we learned in terms of building charging solutions in and for India, and in India and for the world, is that you need to create a technology in-house. So that's when I started Bright Blue in 2019, and we started building the intelligent charging technology stack completely in-house. And now we supply electric vehicle charging solutions to companies here in India, to market players here in India, but we've also started exports. And I think the key driving factor behind all of this is the fact that we very strongly believe in the fact that we want to create impact at scale. The world needs to move to clean modes of energy generation, clean modes of energy consumption, basically a huge energy transition as soon and as fast as possible, because needless to say, we're dealing with various problems, climate change, huge amounts of air pollution, and electric mobility really solves a lot of these problems, and provided obviously that the electricity is also generated in a clean manner. So that's really what the driving factor is. In India, we've got access to a huge pool of talented engineers. That's one that's still available at an affordable cost. That's unlike something that you have in Europe or in the US. Plus the labor cost for assembling the hardware, which we do here in Goa, also really is a lot lower. So we gain about 35 to 40% in our cost structures while making our intelligent charging solutions here in India, and we're building a global company out of India. So that's really what the background is and what we're doing. And I look forward to engaging with my fellow panelists and with the audience as such. If you have any questions right now, please feel free to ask me. I'm available right now, and if not, then we move on to the next candidate. So are there any quick questions?
What we'll do is let them absorb it, and we'll come back to questions from the audience. But please, ladies and gentlemen, reserve a lot of questions. We'd love an interactive session. Thank you, Vibran. Also very nice to hear that you've talked of Indian talent, you've talked of the skill of the labor force, and you've spoken about the fact that you want to set up a global company out of India. You'll get scale here, and you'll get technology and people. So a good place. And I hope you attract some of your other European friends as well. Okay, great. We'll move on to Sundar Iyer. Sundar is the founder and CEO of SKS Clean Tech. SKS Clean Tech works on 3 clean tech verticals of business: solarization, EV logistics, and battery swapping, what he calls as Swappy. The Swappy vertical has one of India's first solar-powered EV swapping stations, curbing emissions, of course, in the energy sector. He's also the founder and CEO of Monokeros Ventures, which invests in innovative tech startups specializing in deep tech. Over to you, Sundar.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Vipin, for such a good I would say description. I couldn't put better myself. So just to give a brief background on the formation of how did we start with SKS Clean Tech. I come from a mobility background. Did my master's in Rochester, New York, and then worked in Honda R&D for about 5 years, and moved back right before lockdown in 2020. So while I was during the lockdown, we wanted to find what is the opportunity in the mobility segment, because I come from the background. And the buzzword of the town was, okay, so electric mobility is the way to go. And we already were doing some small level solarization. So we understood the energy market, I would say fairly enough, that where exactly the problem statements are really there. But once we started doing a deep dive, the problem statements that started coming out as first, the initial capex that it takes to buy an electric vehicle is fairly higher. The second one is the charging time. And the third one is the range anxiety that comes with it, right? Like, because the infrastructure, so there was already a chicken and the egg problem where the OEMs are waiting for the charging infrastructure to be set up. The charging infrastructure guys are waiting for the OEMs to come out with the vehicles in the market. So both of them, they're just waiting for the other person to take the lead. So what we started working on is, okay, so how could we build a more sustainable solution? So that was one of the key drivers for us. So as you all know, almost every state right now has got, I would say, a EV pricing of, electricity tariff. Which is, I would say, majority of the business models that has been built around is based on that to start with. So we wanted to see, okay, so what in case, there is always a what in case if, they remove the tariff, sometime in not 3 years or 5 years, what happens then, right? And how do we protect ourselves, with a more sustainable solution going forward? So we took all of these problem statement that comes and then adding on to the word sustainable that comes in, the source of electricity, as my fellow panelist Vibrin has mentioned, the source of electricity is something which we take it really seriously. And it is clean. Electric mobility is clean compared to IC engine, but is it as clean or is it like 100% clean? So how do we make that happen? So we then took all of these problem statements together, and then so we developed India's first solar powered grid hybrid battery swapping stations. And so one of the versions that why we wanted to target that, and specifically in the B2B or the micro mobility segment for the two-wheeler or the three-wheeler, is if you ask any Swiggy's and Zomatos, what is stopping them from moving to electric vehicle? The first problem statement that would say is, first, it just allows you for 60 or 70 kilometers unless and until they go for a bigger battery pack. Number two is the cost of the vehicle itself. It's a massive capex, upfront capex, right? So the solution that comes with both of that is you don't really have to own the battery pack. We will own the battery pack and we will give you battery as a service. And guess what? We will not increase our pricing over a period of next 10 years. And why is that? Because the moment when I amortize the solar panels, essentially we get free electricity for the next 20, 25 years of the solar panels, right? So which means that the inflationary portion that comes with the electricity tariff is something which we, I would say we would be able to negate that to some extent. So these are all the benefits that we wanted to enter into the market in. And so simultaneously, we wanted to also partner up with a lot of OEMs. We've partnered up with an electric three-wheeler OEM for exclusively the battery swapping partner in the logistics space as well. So a lot more partnerships in the pipeline, and we are working on the battery technology right now with another, in partnership with another battery startup. And that is something which will be launched hopefully in the month of Jan. And that is something which will also bring down our capex drastically lower than what it is, that we currently have. So looking forward to a lot of questions from your side, and also, fellow panelists, the vibrant discussions here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sundar, and thank you for raising the problem statements, including CapEx, including range anxiety, battery tech, and of course, swapping being a solution. It's an interesting solution between swapping and charging. But can I move on to Shikha now? Shikha Rokadia works as a research consultant for the International Council on Clean Transportation, ICCT. She's interested in programs and policy frameworks aimed at reducing greenhouse gases, energy intensity, and air quality impacts related to the transport sector. Shikha has worked on climate change, renewable energy, and clean air, and she holds a Master's of Science in Chemical Engineering from the Ohio State University. Over to you, Shikha.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sondhi, and a huge thanks to CII for the opportunity to be here today. I think a lot has already been said. I would just like to draw attention to a few key anchor areas that India needs to pay attention to now to really align the changes which are taking place today in the mobility landscape with the agenda of decarbonization. So if we are serious to align ourselves with a trajectory, a carbon trajectory, which will achieve, limit global warming change to 1.5 degrees C by 2050, globally, we need to ensure that the policies, programs, and technologies that we pursue ensure that greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 are lower than where we are today, despite of the growth in volumes. And India is one of the largest auto markets. I mean, we're the 5th largest passenger vehicle market globally. We're the world's largest two-wheeler market. So what we do matters a lot in terms of contributions to the transport sector emission changes. If India pursues with the current scheme of things, like a business as usual scenario where we have a low to moderate level of policy intervention, CO2 emissions as well as energy intensity is likely to triple, if not quadruple, by 2050. And in order to align ourselves with a trajectory that ensures that, okay, so now the next 10 years, we're going to peak our emissions, and then onwards, we're on a downward trajectory, so that by 2050, we're almost 45 to 50% lower to where emission levels are today. In order to do that, we need to align all our market strategies and policies with a very high level of ambition. And that high level of ambition calls upon, which was mentioned before as well, multiple components. Now, the bulk of those emission reductions are going to be delivered by a transition to zero emission vehicles. So we're looking at nearly 100% electrification of new sales by 2050 across segments, and for mass segments like two-wheelers and four-wheelers, even sooner in the 2035 to 2040 timeframe. Over and above this, we mustn't forget that in the interim, while we keep our eye on that larger transition, there are also very significant and available opportunities to squeeze out emission reduction benefits on account of fuel efficiency improvements in the combustion engine as well. So we must not forget the combustion engine and let it get too comfortable. There are lots of opportunities for our vehicles to be even more efficient. Thirdly, there is a role for alternative fuels as well, although I think it's important to put into perspective the relative contribution for alternative fuels with respect to zero emission technologies as far as deep decarbonization is concerned. So just for example, if we look at passenger cars registered in India today, a typical petrol car versus a battery electric vehicle based on today's grid or the grid projections between today and 2031, a car operating during that period is likely to have life cycle emissions already about 30% lower than the petrol car. And going forward, as the grid gets cleaner, life cycle emissions from battery electric vehicles are going to be even lower. When we look at hydrogen, ideally the pathway has to be green hydrogen. If it is gray hydrogen, then the emission benefits are not that significant. But if we consider green hydrogen, for a car registered today, we can expect that life cycle emissions would be about 68% lower in comparison to a petrol car registered today. However, from the perspective of long-term electricity, which is sourced from long-term electric cars which are powered by renewable electricity, if we are to move to a scenario which is an almost 100% renewable grid, in that case, emission benefits from electric cars would be 80% lower in comparison to petrol cars today. Everything else pales in comparison, whether it's blended fuels, the entire mix. So we mustn't keep our eye away from where the focus needs to be. So really, it's these two technologies which have the maximum potential, and one relatively perhaps offers more advantages in comparison to the other in terms of emission intensity as well, and perhaps suitability to certain applications. Now, keeping that in mind, if we bring into perspective what governments globally are doing to drive these kind of changes, we see that their efforts are organized around 5 key frameworks. Number one is to have phase-out targets. So very clear ambition in terms of when we want to phase out the combustion engine. So I think about 17 countries now have declared targets to phase out combustion engines between the 2025 to 2050 timeframe. Number two, we need fiscal incentives. And I think here the government of India really needs to be commended because we do have a very conducive environment offering very generous demand side and supply side incentives to clean mobility options. Number three, charging infrastructure. And I think, the more, we probably don't have enough time to comment on it, but it's a very important pillar. Consumer awareness. And I think where our theory of change lies, as a policy research organization is, if you look at globally leading EV markets today, these markets, the deployment of zero emission vehicles in these markets is far greater than the rest of the auto markets, largely on account of strong regulatory signals that these markets send out. And that's the missing link in India today. India needs to send out very strong regulatory signals to assure investors and manufacturers to start building capacity at scale that will align us with the kind of timelines that we're aiming for. And really the key opportunities and the kinds of regulatory signals I think that India can deploy, especially towards segments like two-wheelers and four-wheelers, which are high volume segments and also a key component of urban mobility. They include, one is early market stimulating frameworks. So mechanisms like zero emission vehicle mandates, which have been proven to be very successful in getting market rates close to 10%, 15% deployment levels. From the longer term perspective, regulations such as stringent fuel efficiency standards, taxation, and I would say the fourth perhaps important one from the urban side of things is access regulations such as zero emission zones. So I think with that, I would just like to conclude the high level messages that I wanted to convey. Thank you.
Thank you, Shikha. Thank you also for raising green hydrogen or hydrogen generally and blended fuels, and the five pillars that you see are important. Let me move on to our last speaker, Aryaman Sengar. He serves as the Chief of Staff, Head of Government Relations and Investor Relations for Revolt Motors. It's an interesting name. Prior to Revolt, he was the CFO of Avantha Technologies. He's a certified finance risk manager from the Global Association of Risk Professionals and a sports enthusiast in his free time. Over to you, Aryaman.
Thank you, Mr. Sodhi. Thank you for the great introduction. I would like to thank CII for having us over here. And looking around, I think, I've been telling a lot of people, whoever I meet at these EV conferences, that it's refreshing to see fresh faces here, because EV conferences happen so often in Delhi now that I kind of try to compare it to the Delhi social scene, wherein it doesn't matter which conference you go to, you'll see the same people everywhere. So it's fantastic to see completely new set of audience. Coming to the EV two-wheeler space, within the urban mobility topic at hand, I would like to address the EV two-wheeler space. So as Mr. Sodhi just mentioned that we are Revolt Motors, we are a high-speed two-wheeler, currently a motorcycle manufacturing company based out of Manesar. We have been in production since 2019. We have roughly around 20 to 22,000 bikes on the road across the country. We have 27 different dealerships in 23 different cities all across the country, all the way from the north, south, east, west. I don't think we've left any states per se. Maybe 4 states are currently untouched, and I'll tell you why we haven't really touched that till now. So I think Revolt's story, I would like to narrate Revolt's story, which is kind of going to give you an idea of where the two-wheeler EV space is right now. Fortunately, we've had I wouldn't say fortunately, unfortunately, but we've had the good or bad fortune of not having the big four of Hero MotoCorp, TVS, Bajaj, and Royal Enfield enter the EV market. So due to whatever reason. So having started the company earlier, I think the view of my founder was a very simple thing, that even though everyone was planning on taking out EV scooters, we wanted to be the motorcycle manufacturers due to the breakup between motorcycles and scooters in the ICE space. Obviously, right now it's significantly skewed in the EV space to scooters because there are no products on the road. We are technically the only production EV motorcycle company in the country. So obviously, initially, like everyone else, Revolt Motors also started with importing CKD kits from China, got a design going. And then early in 2021, we were able to completely localize. All our components are coming from India within the different automotive clusters. What that did for us was a couple of things. One was obviously my supply chain wasn't getting hampered at any point of time back in the day because of COVID restrictions. The moment there is even a 1% case in China, they kind of tend to shut down. So it was able to bring our supply chains in place. And also, I don't know about the rest of the industry, but we are also, I believe, the first EV two-wheeler high-speed manufacturer, which is positive as far as gross margin and bottom line is concerned, which is a big achievement for us last year. Having said that, I would like to direct everyone's attention to the problems that are currently being faced from a two-wheeler and more from a urban mobility perspective also, but more from a two-wheeler perspective. One is the demand side. We as an OEM were very surprised to notice that the TG or the target market that we were trying to address when we started selling off the bikes versus the people who actually ended up buying our bikes is fairly different. We were expecting an X kind of socioeconomic background consumer to buy our bikes. But people, due to, I would say, my anticipation would be that because of high fuel prices, because of multiple different reasons, people below the expected socioeconomic class are also significantly after buying an EV, despite the cost being upwards of 1 lakh. And that is across different our competitors as well. So from a demand side, I don't think so. Demand is currently an issue within the OEM two-wheeler space. From a supply side, I think depending on how much time you put in and money you put in, and there is that learning period, I would say, of 1.5 to 2 years, in which there is a constant struggle between your sourcing team versus your design team versus your production team, wherein design wants it to be done in an X way, and then sourcing is just trying to get the product out of the window as fast as possible. So that I feel that that fight is necessary for any OEM. We have fortunately gone through that. Now, the third point of contention being finance, both from a consumer finance perspective and from a company finance perspective. When I say consumer finance perspective, actually, interestingly, we had a fantastic conference a couple of weeks back done by Niti Aayog and RMI, wherein all different stakeholders were made to sit in one small mini group, and we were genuinely talking about issues. So what came out of that was, from the financing perspective, was that banks today are finding it really tough to get behind an EV financing. Right now, my consumer, when he goes into the market, he's picking up financing at around 18 to 20%, and 18 to 22%, which is absolutely ridiculous in the two-wheeler space. So then we found out what the reasons were why banks aren't being able to get behind it. Insurance is also a very big part of any consumer buying a two-wheeler. Slowly, we have seen in the last 1.5 years, insurance companies also getting behind the EV space. There is obviously a proposal tabled with the government currently to make EV financing priority sector lending also, which we're hoping should get passed. Then we can hope that the interest rates do decrease a bit. And the fourth point of contention, which I feel is future visibility. Right now, the OEM space, and probably why the big four hasn't really entered the space, is, I would say, not completely, but significantly dependent on the fiscal benefits that have been given by the government, as Shikha ma'am had said, wherein the FAME subsidy, which currently gives me, for Revolt Motors, it gives me 48,000 rupees per bike that I sell, because it's directly proportional to the size of the battery, into my bank account. So obviously that helps me become gross margin or bottom line positive as well. So the visibility regarding that is supposed to end on the 31st of March 2024. I would like to reserve my comments regarding what's going to happen to that incentive post that. But that is a big question mark for the industry. But we seem to be moving in the right space. A lot of great things have happened. I don't know if any industry has progressed so far and so fast within a year and a half, from when EV was absolutely dead a year and a half to now. We are sitting here and you see so many of two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and four-wheelers on the road, which are making significant amount of impact across everyone's lives in this country. Yeah.
Thank you, Ariman. Very, very important one. Important that you're profitable so that it can be done. I think that's important. Finance and insurance people always need data of the past. And when anything doesn't have a past, then it becomes a challenge. And that's where the challenge will be, because how do you actually look forward, especially insurance? So it's something that will get resolved over a period of time. As far as the audience are concerned, we'd love to take more questions from the audience. So please feel free to put up your hands, and I'll only ask if there's... let me ask the first one, then I'll come to you. Okay, in terms of regulatory changes, and Shikha spoke about many, but I'd ask Mr. O.P. Agarwal and maybe Vibran after that. If there are two changes in the current regulations that you would want, what would they be? Mr. Agarwal and then Vibran.
Thanks, Mr. Sondhi. I think two changes. The first change I would say is in the Motor Vehicles Act, as far as public transport buses are concerned. There is a very outdated kind of a distinction between a stage carriage and a contract carriage, which in many ways is obstructing a lot more in terms of shared mobility, bigger vehicles coming into the market. I think that is an outdated kind of thing which needs to go. The second I would say is I completely agree with Shikha's point that the government needs to come out with very clear signals on when they would phase out IC engines. I think that signal has not come, and I think that would be a very important signal to bring in. Let me stop with that.
Thank you, Agarwal Saab. Just to comment on IC engines, they are in various forms and sizes, and therefore perhaps marine engines would continue for more time than engines. Where you're talking of urban mobility,
I was talking of urban
I know.
mobility.
Please ask the government to be very specific, otherwise there'll be challenges. So we talk in a highly focused manner on two-wheelers and four-wheelers related to urban mobility. Very well taken, Agarwal Saab. Thank you. Vibran.
Yeah, I've got two desires. I think the first one it can be summed up as let the polluter pay. I would at this stage just say tax IC engine vehicles just a lot higher and EVs a lot lower. So let the polluter pay for bringing more EVs on road. Very simple. If you're driving, if you want to drive a diesel car that really pollutes the air, feel free to do so, but pay for it and pay a lot more for it than EVs do. And then with that money that you bring into the treasury, fund subsidies and schemes that promote EVs and really accelerate the adoption of EVs. So let the polluter pay. That's number one. The second one for me is something obviously coming from a charging solutions company, is that also look at subsidies for setting up charging infrastructure, whether it's in public spaces, semi-public spaces, really subsidize it for the businesses that are setting it up, because that initial penetration and for people to see that charging infrastructure is out there that they can charge, because it's a different paradigm. It's not like going to a gas station. It's really topping up your mobile phone or your laptop. It works the same with EVs in shopping malls, in hotels, in other semi-public locations like parking lots that are privately managed. Subsidize the setup of EV charging solutions that will really drive penetration and growth of electric vehicles. So those are my two desires.
Very well taken, and let the polluter pay is great and put well as well. There's a question at the back. Could you please introduce yourself and then ask a question if you want from a specific panelist or generally? Mike, please.
Good afternoon.
Okay, go ahead anyway. Let's see if we can hear you.
So at Mexico. So my question is with Mr. Sanger. So I'll be just asking one question that on the roadside and if any e-vehicles comes. So since I am a safety professional also, so it comes in mind and sometimes we get scared also. A vehicle passes very speedy way and the children and anyone get scared. So one is safety related and second one is while we are going for purchasing a vehicle, so it comes in the mind of everyone. Even I challenge this, that why you should go for e-vehicle. So can you just present the cost economy and breakup of the all fixed cost and running cost, how we are going with our petrol and these vehicles, fuel-based vehicle and e-vehicles. So my safety concern is much because yesterday I was passing in Roorkee. Like we are in Roorkee, so we are residing in Roorkee. So there one Nexon car passed out, and I was just walking with my child. So my child told, "Papa, dekho how dangerous it is." So we cannot compromise our safety on behalf of environment.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I actually didn't understand just the final question. If you can just repeat, please, the two questions. One is the safety. One I believe is safety and.
So second question is like, if you talk as a customer, I'm a customer. Now I have one car which I am driving right now, which is on petrol base. Now, if I'm planning and my mind is very much sincere and honest for this environment protection. So while going for the e-vehicle, so how do you present the cost, economy and breakup in a customer mind that you are better than the petrol?
Okay. So I would like to address that from a TCO perspective. Analysis has happened multiple places. So right now, if you see, let's talk about technically a low cost two-wheeler out there, let's say a Bajaj, a Splendor or a Passion or a Passion Pro. Currently, if you go into the market to buy one of these, you spend after taxes, etc., somewhere around 78 to 80,000 rupees is the cost of an ICE low caliber, common man motorcycle. Today, if you, let's say, and I can talk about my own company, I would not like to talk about anyone else. If you go and buy a Revolt Motors today, let's say in Delhi, you are going to shell out around 1,25,000 rupees for that. So let's assume the difference is around 40,000 rupees. Running off an EV two-wheeler today is fairly cheap. In a 30 rupee charge, you can go around 150 kilometers. For the same thing for ICE, actually, so we did the TCO analysis, and for a Bajaj Splendor versus a Splendor versus a Revolt RV400, you will break even in 15,000 kilometers. So that is roughly around 2 years of usage for a person who's running around 7,500 kilometers. So that is something that pinches the consumer today only when we saw that it was more of a psychological effect that the moment petrol went over 100 rupees and we started seeing a lot more inquiries. I would like to believe we are a very data heavy company. We try to make as many decisions as possible depending on data, which is what has led us to open our dealerships in certain areas. So from a costing perspective, I would say that 1.5 year, 2 year timeline when the consumer sees that he's going to get that cost advantage and it'll be pretty much free after that. And the second thing which people have actually slowly realized in the EV space is that you do not have to go in for servicing. I mean, you do your once a year thing, or unless your vehicle is off-road, you just do your standard servicing and you literally do not have to pay anything more than 1,000 rupees for the whole year, and that should do you good. So apart from the high initial cost, which is, let's say, 30% or 20% higher than the ICE vehicle today, maintenance is what, let's say, the Marutis and the Hyundais of the country have kind of come ahead and proven themselves is very low in EV. Combine both these things together, and we are actually seeing the consumer behavior significantly shift wherein people are open to adopting EV two-wheelers. Now, coming to your safety aspect, I didn't really get that question, but I kind of understand what you're trying to say. You wanted to know from a safety perspective, the battery fires, etc., that is currently going on? No? Okay.
Why don't we do one thing? Let's see if there are any more questions and see if we can give an opportunity to anybody else. Yes, please. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. Oh, no problem. Hi, I'm a public policy consultant, and we've just started working in the space of sustainability. At present, I understand that the efforts in the EV space are mostly centered around strengthening initial penetration. But I do see that charging infrastructure at the moment relies a lot on coal-powered electricity. So how are we visualizing that shift to renewable energy? While there are gaps in policies in terms of subsidizing renewable energy, how are we visualizing that change in the industry?
Okay, who wants to pick that? Shikha, would you want to take that?
Yeah, so the way I understand your question, are you talking about grid decarbonization efforts? So I think from that perspective, India is on a very ambitious and well-defined trajectory to go to 450 gigawatts of renewable power by 2030. So ensuring that we stay on track, I think the government and the power sector has done a lot to ensure that over time the grid is going to get cleaner, and we have to hope that those changes deliver. But if I'm understanding your question, are you talking about off-grid electricity? Is that your question? Okay.
The goal, I think there's 130 gigawatt gap still in the goal that we have.
Yeah. So I think it's important to put into perspective that the EV that you buy today is going to get cleaner over time versus the combustion vehicle that you buy today is going to get dirtier over time. So fuel efficiency deteriorates as you use the vehicle, whereas the grid gets cleaner. And that's exactly the point that I was trying to make, that when you look at it on a life cycle basis, it's not just about how much the grid is emitting today. I think the data is very clear that even today, if you bought an electric car today, with the grid mix that is projected to be there in place for the next 10 years, an electric car is already about 19 to 34% cleaner than your petrol car. And going forward, it will get even cleaner.
Okay, good. Thank you. We've got 3 minutes. Anybody else who wants to ask a question? Yeah, please go ahead. So last question from the audience, please.
I am Dinesh Trivedi. I am working as advisor to industry. I'm from Panipat, Haryana. Related to safety of EVs, we have seen that fires have been really caught, and it is a really serious matter regarding a driver's safety point of view. So we have experts here. Have you come across some standards to suggest to Government of India that, say, when it's a lithium-ion battery, then technically how it can be really safeguarded? What are the factors, say, some anode, some chemical reaction between anode and cathode, which has caused the fires? Have you come across some really technical standards to suggest that by adopting these standards, the EV can be a really safeguard so that
Sure, we got your question. No, thanks a lot. I think Sundar will answer that.
And thanks a lot for the question. And I think that's probably the most apt question in the electric mobility is a fear factor before buying the vehicle because of the news articles that has come and the recent one, in I would say in the south as well, where 8 feared dead. So the government of India has launched a battery safety protocol, I think 2 weeks ago. So the battery standard has already been there. It is AIS 156. And they've made a lot of amendments 2 weeks ago, which requires much more stricter, I would say, safety protocols and the testings that I've already put in place, which was not there. And yes, I would say a couple of years ago, the battery space was not that regulated. And predominantly, it was more of packaging everything together into the market. So there was not too much of importance that was given to, I would say, the brain of the battery pack, which is the BMS, and how exactly the BMS needs to control the safety measures. But I think 2 weeks ago, the government of India has already put I would say the regulations, and starting October 1st, you can't have a single vehicle which can be sold into the market predominantly with the older battery specifications unless and until the vehicle OEMs have certified for the new battery rulings. So that is something which, that is a push that has also come from the government because of the fires that have come in. So I think that's something which, is going to change the safety question that you had.
Thanks, Sundar. Vibran, last word to you.
Yeah, I'd like to add one final point to this. It's really sort of very simple, but if you look at the number of fires that have happened with EVs versus fires that have happened with IC engine vehicles, where you literally have an engine where there are explosions taking place, it's much lower. So EVs, as it is and as it stands, is already a lot safer than IC engine vehicles. And I think because EVs are new, obviously it gets a lot more attention. There is a lot of vested interests out there as well that try to push negative publicity that don't want EV adoption to happen. So I think it's really important to note that there's a lot of FUD out there as well, and that EVs are actually safer than IC engine vehicles.
Thank you very much. Thank you. No, I think we're running out of time. We can pick it up after this. I think the panelists will be happy to answer after this. But thank you very much. This is a subject that's going to grow. We didn't discuss hydrogen at all because the focus is electric vehicles. Hydrogen may be more in intercity and outside long distance, perhaps in the future. So electric vehicles more so in urban mobility. The government has really pushed hard with incentives, with policy. They'll have to keep evolving because we don't have, I think the concern really would be of supply chain that was briefly touched upon by Aryaman as well. Supply chain, and therefore it's very important that India become a major supplier of electric vehicle components like India did for IC engine components, specifically batteries. So those of you who are there, invest in batteries, in battery technology, in battery management systems. Otherwise, we'll be dependent on our neighbor in the north. But Thank you very much to my co-panelists. Thank you to CII, and thank you for the audience and your questions. Thank you.
We thank our distinguished dignitaries for an enriching and thought-provoking session.